Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to What's in My Head podcast. I'm your host, Julian, and today I'm joined by Van, the father of Johnny Bravo. Van, how are you, sir?
I'm doing well, thanks. Woo!
Hey, man, it's been a long time coming. And, usually in this part of the show, I'll start to ask, where you got your start, how you got in animation. But I wanted to take a peek behind the curtain for just a second. I would love, what's that?
That's fine. I'm sorry. I interrupted you. Keep going.
No, it's perfectly fine, man. It's a give and go relationship. When you bring Johnny Bravo to Cartoon Network, what was that initial pitch like? Do you remember, obviously this is like 25 plus years ago at this point, so I'm pretty sure it's going to be hard to remember the exact details or what you were wearing or anything like that. How nervous were you pitching this show? I mean, what did it feel like?
It's funny because I'm like a pack rat, so I'm going to tell you something really funny or interesting. I don't know why this is funny or interesting. I have binders full of stuff back here. And what happened was, when I was pitching Johnny Bravo, I like the history of the whole Cartoon Network in these binders, if you would like to know.
Oh, that's so cool.
But when I pitched it, I actually pitched Johnny Bravo on the very first day of the shorts pitches, which is kind of interesting. I don't know if anyone's ever talked about the pitching of the shorts. So it was on Friday, September 24th at 9:30 a.m. The first pitch was Bill Hanna, but I think Bob Onrado pitched Hard Luck Duck. That was the very first short that they pitched. And then the second one was The Many Hats of Leon and Rufus by Tony Craig and Robert Scanaway. And then the third one was Will Panginiban. He pitched this show called Sub-Hero. And then Pat Ventura pitched George and Jr. And then I pitched Johnny Bravo. Those were the first 5 pitches of the shorts program at Hanna-Barbera.
Dude, how old were you at that time?
I was 23.
23. You know what I was doing at 23? Trying not to shit my pants, getting yelled at by people, man. You're in front of royalty. Bill Hanna. I'm assuming
he actually wasn't there. He was, because he's older. So who was there? Linda Sminsky was there. Mike Lazo was there.
Fred Seibert was there.
Fred Seibert was there. A bunch of other people. I think Janet Mazzotti was there. Julie King Rich. Bunch of folks, and it was just kind of funny. See, I remember most of the stuff that happened on that day because I brought my portfolio. I'm like, hey, this is how I wore a tie. People were like, what are you doing? Because everyone else that pitched that day already worked at Hanna-Barbera. So wore my tie, pitched my show. I put up my portfolio, and no one looked at it. And they're like, oh, that's great. And then I showed my student film, and they watched it. And in the middle of running the student film, like Fred Seibert walked out. And I was like, wait, what? He had to do something. And then he came back in. I don't know if you watched it before, whatever it was. And I proceeded to pitch the show. I actually these were my pitch boards that I did for the show. I still have them because they actually blew them up so that I could pitch it live, I guess you can say.
Yeah.
So anyways, I could bore you with all the details of that day, but those were
Oh, that's not boring by any stretch of the imagination, because you're the first person that I've actually asked, what was that pitch like? And you're the first person that said, I actually remember. And not only do I remember, I've got all this shit right here, all of this stuff. Like, very rarely does, like, I think that's cool as shit. Have you ever thought, like, a lot of the guests I've had on, they'll take a lot of their artwork or artwork they've collected, and then they lend it out to shows and museums and stuff like that. Have you thought about doing something like that with your art and everything? Because you've got what it seems to be like everything since, you started pitching back in the 90s.
I did so for the first one I did at the Museum of Television and Radio. They did a whole thing. So they took a whole bunch of pieces, like the first drawing that I ever did of Johnny Bravo, the first had some cells. This was actually, when I pitched Johnny Bravo, I didn't know what they wanted. So these were actually two designs that I did of him. one, if you notice, he had Popeye arms and stuff like that.
Yeah.
It was just kind of, I was like, I don't know what you guys want or how you guys want to do it, but anyways, that was that.
So when that's going on, when you're giving that pitch, you're, like I said, you're 23 years old, and that's insane to think about, right? You are so, and I'm not calling you old, man, but I'm just saying that is so young to be sitting in front of, like I said, legends. Obviously Bill wasn't there, but you had what would soon be Titans. You had Fred, you had Linda, you had Mike, you had all of these people that would be calling the shots for Cartoon Network, Adult Swim, and all this other stuff. Obviously, with hindsight being 2020 or foresight at this point, because you're looking forward, were you amazed when they said, hey, we want to take this for a show? Or were you just like, yeah, motherfucker, I know, we're going to take this for a show?
There's that part of me that was like, I think I'm amazing. And then there's that part of me like, what am I doing? They didn't want the show. I don't know if Fred Seibert ever talked to you about that. Did he tell you that?
No, we talked a little bit, but I had him on for a couple different hours. I'm going to have him back on to go a little bit more in detail. But I was very new when I had Fred. So I wish I could get some of these interviews back for the first time now with more experience, because I've been doing this for about a year, and I was so nervous to talk to Fred. My palms were sweaty. I was so nervous to talk to Fred because, like I said, he was the, I won't say the gatekeeper, but he was the gatekeeper for Cartoon Network. He ushered in this era, this renaissance, and I was so nervous. I was shaking. My hands were sweaty. I was like, I didn't know what to say. And then, he talked me into it. And then, but yeah, he didn't talk too much about Johnny Bravo. He talked a little bit about a lot of things. So
yeah, he was awesome. He was he's like a cartoon fan. The thing is, when they had the Cartoon Network Advisory Board, do you remember that? Did anyone ever talk to you about that?
Yeah, Robert Alvarez has talked to it about a little bit, and then David as well with the red guy, and Craig McCracken with him. So yeah, we've talked about a little bit about it.
So yeah, the Cartoon Network Advisory Board, they all got together, and it was kind of a publicity stunt, but it was also kind of a really interesting thing where Mike Lazo and everybody, they wanted to know how did you guys make cartoons? Mm-hmm. They're like, well, we had one director, and it wasn't to sell stuff. It was just one director, one person's point of view, and we let them do what they do. And so then they put out the call for everybody, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't know why I'm telling you this whole history of this part.
Oh, I love it, man.
But Fred's idea was, let's start it off with George and Junior, like classic MGM. It was already in their library. Mm-hmm. Let's do those. And so he loved Pat Ventura's artwork. He thought Pat was amazing. Pat's like the future of Hanna-Barbera. So if they thought that they would do like the next buddy stuff, like Tom and Jerry, mm-hmm. George and Junior, blah, blah, blah. They thought that's what can hold a 7-minute show. That's what can hold that you can only tell that so much story in 7 minutes. So anyways, if you notice, it's been a while since I've talked to people. So if I start talking about blah, 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 it sounds really weird. That's just because I haven't been talking to too many people. But anyways, back to what we were talking about. So Fred was looking for that. So when I pitched Johnny Bravo, he didn't like it. He was like, Ellen Cockrell was the one that was pushing for it because she really liked it. Mm-hmm. And it was Ellen and Julie Kane Rich and Janet Mazzotti. And they actually went to Fred and said, we actually like this one. Mm-hmm. Because after they'd been watching all these pitches, they're like, you need to do something. So Ellen called me back in and said, hey, Fred doesn't think this is cartoony enough. Can you make it cartoony? Mm-hmm. I was like, sure. So I have pages in here where I just did a bunch of squash and stretch. I did wacky things with like sumo wrestlers and all that other stuff, just random jokes. And they go, okay, I guess we'll buy it. And but we'll hire him on a step deal. So if we like the script, then we'll let you stay. If we like the storyboard, we'll let you stay. If we like I felt like my days were numbered. So it was one of those things. So it's not like they said, "Hey, welcome." They said, "Hey, here's strings attached."
Yeah.
And so every day I was coming in going, "Oh, I think my last day might be in a month." So I just worked and did as much as I could. And then they liked it, and then they kept liking it. And yeah, that was a funny one.
What's that vibe like? Because I mean, obviously, I assume they want something, or they want your IP, they want your show. So I got to imagine they want you too. What is that feeling like for you specifically, going in there knowing like today might be my last day because I'm on this type of, if they like it, I'm cool. If not, I'm kind of on my way out. What's that feeling like for you? Is that hard to keep creating and getting in that mindset, that brain space?
Yeah. So it was okay here. So on my first day at work, actually my first day at work was supposed to be, it was right after the earthquake, the big LA earthquake. So Hanna-Barbera was actually torn down. I thought I have a piece of the building somewhere in here. Anyways, I called him up, and this guy, Bobby, they called him Lobby Bobby. He was the guy in the front. He's like, yeah, nobody's here, so you might want to call back later. I was like, okay, I'll call back later. I guess my first day is not my first day. Yeah. So I eventually got a hold of him. So I actually started a week later than I thought I was going to start. And the first day I moved in to this office with, it was like two offices put together with one of the walls cut out. So Paul Rudish and Craig McCracken were on the other side. They were starting up Powerpuff. Mm-hmm. And then I was on the other side. And it was just a whole CalArts gang. Yeah. And so I didn't know anybody. Everybody knew each other. People would just keep walking in. Hey, good job, Craig and Paul, and blah, blah, blah. And we didn't really talk that much. We'd start up a conversation that wouldn't last very long. Then I'd just be working on my show. They'd be working on theirs. And then Gendy moved in. And then so it was just us four. And again, the whole CalArts people. And I was like, I need to move out of this office because I feel like I feel like I'm in the wrong office. Like there's all these people that know each other and I'm the random person in the corner. Yeah. And so they moved me into an office down the hall. So so when I say it's weird because these guys had been working on Two Stupid Dogs. Mm-hmm. So they all knew it's like they have a job, they have another job. It's like they were straddling things and they're throwing stuff over to Craig, like, hey Craig, did you know he designed, I don't think he talks about it very much, the Dumb and Dumber cartoon.
We talked briefly, I can't remember if we talked briefly on air, but I know I asked him some questions off air, kind of like I do with everybody. And we talked about it. Like I said, I can't remember because that one went almost 2 hours as well. I know we brought it up. I just don't know how in depth we went into it.
It's just fun. It's like they were asking them to do freelance, and there was just all kinds of stuff they were doing. So they were all connected, but I didn't know anybody. So I hired my friend Andy Bjelk. Mm-hmm. And I was like, hey, Andy, come on and work with me because I don't know anybody else. And so it was just me and him for a while. And then other folks joined in. But anyways, when I say it was hard because they, again, it's a hard thing to like befriend everybody. Yeah. Actually, it was really nice was Robert Alvarez was really cool. He was fun to hang out with. And so was Pat Ventura and this other guy named Robert Ramirez. He was totally cool. But I was very much like, I guess you can say I wasn't very talkative around all the CalArts guys because I felt intimidated they were just really good at what they did. Yeah. And they already worked and they were my age. So I could talk to older people because I loved older people. I think you have to understand, I was a huge cartoon fan, right? Mm-hmm. So kind of like you get your dream job and you're like, what? It was like being in I think Thurop called it a fun factory. Thurop Van Orman.
Yeah.
I was like, I like that, how you describe it. It's a fun factory. You go there and it's super cool. So I would go hang out in other people's offices, and Joe Barbera had a revolving door, not a revolving door. He had an open door policy.
Yeah.
So they're like, if you guys in the shorts program, they're like, if you guys want to go talk to him or anything, it's like, feel free to go down there. And I think I was the only one that did that because I don't think anybody else had anything to say to him. But I'm like, I want to talk to him about like the MGM days. I want to talk to him about Tom and Jerry. I want to talk about all kinds of cool things. So I used to go down there all the time. And Maggie, his assistant, was like, Van's here.
There's two names I wanted to hit on, and two names that don't get brought up enough. Robert Alvarez, right? I've said it before on multiple occasions. That man is a national treasure. What he's done and what he's seen and what he's worked on. I mean, if you're watching this episode, I got to imagine you've watched some of my other episodes.
Yeah.
He's worked on damn near everything from the 90s, from all the Cartoon Network days, and he's still prolific. He's still working. He's working with JG now, create a regular show. And so he's still working. So it's crazy to see that they can take this man and put him, he's like the right piece for every puzzle. Essentially, you stick him in there and he's the guy that you can really lean on. He's got the expertise. He's that veteran that everybody wanted to work with. What's your favorite Robert Alvarez story? Do you got one whenever you think of Robert that you just look back and like, God damn, Robert, I love that man. But what's your favorite Robert Alvarez story?
Well, I think there was did he ever tell you about the check that he used to have on his wall?
I don't think so.
So Seth MacFarlane got his checking account when he started up at Hanna-Barbera. Yeah. And then he wrote this check to Robert. It said, to Robert Alvarez. And it's paid to the order of Robert Alvarez. And the amount, he wrote jack shit. And then he signed it. And then he just put it. And so he had that check up on his wall for a long time.
Yeah. What did you learn from Robert? I mean, I got to imagine that if you're going down and talking to, Mr. Barbera, that you absorbed a lot from Robert. So what do you think was one of the biggest things you learned from Robert as far as working in this industry goes?
Well, I learned timing, which is awesome. And I learned a lot of animation stuff from him. He actually animated a good portion of the second short, Johnny Bravo short, because we animated it in-house. And so I didn't know any other animators, and Robert was like, I'll do it. So he did some really cool stuff. I still have his animation. But he was fun. One time we did a student film showcase. So like Pat Ventura brought his film, this guy Mark Counselor brought his student film in, and Robert brought in this film that he made when he was younger, which was like a kung fu movie, and it was just really funny to see this live action young Robert Alvarez. He looked like an Indian back then. He's like shirtless and doing all these funny kung fu moves. He was awesome.
Yeah, he's been we'll talk right after we get off of here. Whenever we wrap up, I'll tell you about what I'm working on, because it's still super secret squirrel stuff right now. But he's one of those guys that I've leaned on so heavily because, like I said, he's just worked on everything. His knowledge is so vast. And there's one person that doesn't get brought up enough is him. I mean, I don't want people to ever think, he said it multiple times on the podcast. He didn't create these shows. He didn't come up with the concepts. He was put into a place because they needed his expertise. They needed his knowledge. And he was I don't want to say he was an easygoing guy because I don't know him personally. I just know him through the many hours that we've chatted. But everybody that I've ever met that he's worked with on their shows has said he was such a valuable piece to that puzzle. He was one of those people that everybody could really count on, that when the shit hit the fan, that you'd want Robert right next to you if it was go time. So I want to make sure that, whenever I get the chance to bring him up, whenever I get the chance to hear a story, man, I always like to go for that one. But a name that hasn't come up too often, and before I get to that name, you brought up your student film a couple of times. So we'll talk about that one because there's a lot of fans that asked questions about that. But Bill Hanna's come up a few times, but Mr. Barbera, Joseph Barbera, has not come up too often. So what was that encounter like when you're talking to him? I mean, did you feel like I felt when I was talking to Fred? Were your hands sweaty? Were your knees shaking? I mean, what was that like sitting next to somebody that helped co-create, just decades and decades and decades worth of content that we will never, ever forget?
He was actually fun. Anybody that ever came to visit me at the studio, I used to give them a tour of Joe Barbera's office. So I've 20, 30, 40 times he's given me the same tour. So I could give you the tour of his office right now. If we were walking through it, I could tell you which pictures he would show and point out in his pictures with the Pope, and make people roll Emmys, and he would just do all these interesting things. He'd show the he had what's the oh gosh, what is the name of there's Dick Dastard Muttley. He had a Muttley doll that he liked to press from Japan, and it would laugh, and he got a kick out of that. Anyways, did you know I hired him, sort of?
Really?
Yeah, on Johnny Bravo. I have a couple of Joe Barbera stories. So when I got the show, I went into his office and I go, "Hey, Mr. Barbera, would you like to work on my show?" He's like, "Yeah, sure." I go, "I would love for you to just come in the writing sessions and everything. That would be super cool." Mm-hmm. So he was on our staff for like a few weeks until we got a bill. They're like, "Here's your," I go, "What?" It's his studio. He said he just wanted to hang out. They're like, "No, you have to pay for him."
How big was that bill?
I go, "We don't have the money in our budget to afford Joe Barbera." They're like, "Oh, then he can't work for." It was difficult. I remember I went and saw Maggie. I go, "Could I get Joe? Joe doesn't work on other people's shows." It's like, I go, no. He's not working on my show. It's like, he's just going to come like be a consultant. It's like, I want him to just be there. I want to like absorb from him. She's like, okay. It's like, I had to have a little more respect for him. I came in like 23-year-old, "Hey, come work for me," kind of thing. Like, it wasn't that way. It was more like, I don't know the language to speak. I was like, whatever. So yes, it was like Joe came in and he was part of the he was part of the group, and it was cute because it's like when Maggie would come and get him, he'd like hide. It's like, Mr. B, come on, we gotta go. It's like he liked hanging out with us. My favorite joke of his was we were trying to figure out Super Dupe, and we were like going around. Basically, if you were in the room, this is what Joe would be like. He couldn't keep up because everyone was just like throwing things around. And then so I'd have to stop and go, "Mr. Barbera." So we've got this thing where we've got a supervillain, and where's like some evil supervillainy things, like some physical comedies, things that you can just see. We don't have to like say whatever. He's like, "Well, he just has to do bad things, like he could take a baby and put it in the middle of a freeway." So I guess that's a good supervillainy type thing to do, babies on the freeway. And I guess that was an old joke that he did. He used to come, when he would come up with jokes, there are old jokes. He had like his gaggle of jokes that he would always pull out, which were like, okay, that works. But they were jokes that we'd already heard, and we're like, okay. It's more fun. It was more fun just to ask him like dumb questions.
Yeah.
I think my favorite dumb question that one of my writers, Steve Marmel, he goes, "Mr. Barbera, I was always wondering, what do you think about Snagglepuss being gay?" And Mr. Barbera goes, "What? So Snagglepuss, he's gay, right?" It's like, "No, he's based on Bert Lahr. He beat women." It's like, that's far from gay. So,
oh, yeah.
I was like, okay, that's a good explanation. So we throw things out like that. And
Just to
he
see
always
how he's
had,
thinking.
yep, he always had his fingers, he always had manicures, which
Mhm.
is, he's the only person I'd ever seen that had manicured fingers. Um, but okay, so I'll tell you the one random Joe Barbera story. So when I finished the Scooby Doo episode,
Mhm.
I brought it over to Joe Barbera. I go, hey, Mr. B, I wanted to show you this new episode that I did. It's Johnny Bravo meets Scooby Doo, right? He's like, okay, here we go. So we started playing it and he's watching it, right? This is like right after lunch. So sitting there watching, and like I did everything that I could to make sure that we had the walk cycles, because in order to do that episode, they gave me the whole library of Scooby-Doo stop animation at my disposal, which is amazing. And so I sent all the walk cycles over to Korea to be animated, and they kept coming back, and they didn't take the walk cycles. They just did whatever. They did new walk cycles. And I'm like, no, do the exact same walk cycles. And they're like, you mean just photocopy them? I'm like, yes, photocopy them and just put them on there. That's what I want. And so when they did it, it was awesome.
Yeah.
Anyways, that's the first thing Joe Barbera said after he was watching. He's like, oh, you got the walk cycles right. I was like, yeah, awesome. You noticed. Thank you. And so he's watching, and then he's watching, and then he's like falling asleep. And I was like, oh. I go, and then he'd like sit up. It's like, and then he totally fell asleep like within 4 minutes of the 11-minute show. I don't know if you've ever watched it, but there's an unmasking part
Yes.
in the show where they unmask people, and then you'll say the ghostly gardener, and then at one point, Don Knotts, and then the open one said Joe Barbera, and
Yes.
then Joe Barbera goes like sat up and stuff, and I was watching him, and as soon as he sat up, I like looked at the TV like I didn't notice you were sleeping, but I kind of looked at his corner of my eye, kind of looked, he woke up and he just like looked around and he goes like laughed. And then the show is over, and then he thanked me for keeping the integrity of the characters. He's like, are you doing more with our characters? I'm like, yeah, totally. He's like, great. We'll bring them by next time you do. And I'm like, okay, I totally will. Thanks, Mr. B. That's awesome. So anyways.
Thank you for sharing. Hold on one second. Thank you for sharing that. I've got a special place, and I apologize for talking off the mic, but I got a special place for those characters, man.
No, I do too.
Shaggy and Scooby right here. We're actually we're going, my wife is going as Velma, because there's two cartoon characters that I've always had just it gets me there is what I'm getting at, man. I love looking at Velma, and then always Jessica Rabbit from Who Framed Roger Rabbit. Those are like the two. Like, I'm not into that cartoon shit where it's just like, oh man, I'm lusting after this character. But like when you see somebody dress up as those two characters specifically, and it's well done, you're like, yeah, man, this is what a red-blooded American is supposed to feel like right now. You know what I mean? So
the designs are awesome. I love it. And so yeah, when we did the show, it's like, of course, Velma's gonna love Johnny. That's gonna be cool. That'll be a really special thing. So I think Cartoon Network jumped on that. They made an interstitial with Johnny and Velma and stuff, and it was just a cool. Yeah, I love Velma. I love Scooby Doo. It was hard. It's amazing how much they did not care about Scooby Doo. I remember when it was Scooby Doo's 20th anniversary, I went to the creative services. I'm like, are you guys doing anything for Scooby's 20th? They're like, no, they didn't.
It's insane.
Like, they didn't want to like celebrate. I don't know what it was, but I think they did so much Scooby Doo that they were sick of Scooby Doo by that point. But I totally wasn't.
I've never understood that, because when I think of Cartoon Network, there's a few shows that I think of. Now, obviously, these shows were done back in the day on prime time on different channels, but during my age of consuming cartoons at its height, when it was just either cartoons or it was NBA, it was cartoons or NBA. Like my height, these cartoons were in reruns at this point. but Scooby Doo was at the top of my list. And like I said, when we get off this call, remind me to tell you that story I'm not going to tell you about Scooby Doo when we get off. It's a little personal. I told Robert too, but it's a little personal. But Scooby Doo, the Flintstones, like those two shows right there were like cartoon. That was like my introduction. Like everybody's got their introduction. It's generally like the Looney Tunes, or it's Tom and Jerry, or it's, insert here. Mine was Scooby Doo and the Flintstones. So those two specifically, they will always hold, a special place in my heart. And I'm hoping that since there's so many people my age that were fans like yourself that grew up on shows like that, I'm hoping that you'll see some kind of revival. They just did this Scooby Doo and Courage crossover. They had Be Cool Scooby Doo, which I thought was fantastic. It was a little bit more grown up humor, but I loved it. I thought it was funny. It was fun. The jokes were good. Animation was fantastic. But I do feel like Scooby Doo is one of those characters where they have in their back pocket, and they could do so much more than they're doing with now. I don't know if it's just tied up in licensing, or somebody owns, they don't want to use it, or, they think it's oversaturated, whatever it might be. I really do hope Scooby Doo makes some kind of a comeback, because that character is a cornerstone. When I think of Cartoon Network, I think of Scooby. When I think of Cartoon Network, I think of Fred Flintstone. I think of those two characters. And then when I'm talking old school, when I'm talking modern, I'm thinking, Johnny Bravo, I'm thinking Dexter's Lab, I'm thinking Ed, Edd and Eddy, I'm thinking all these other cartoons I grew up with in the 90s as the other cornerstone, the other pillar for Cartoon Network. So I can't agree with you more. I do think that they should do something a lot, or they should do a lot more with Scooby than they have done in the past.
Well, when I first got the show, I was with Sherry Gunther and Fred and development people. And the first thing that I asked was, can I do a Scooby Doo crossover? Mm-hmm. That's the first thing that I wanted to do, because I love those Scooby Doo episodes where they met like Sonny and Cher and everything. I'm like, let's do one of those. And they're like, okay, you can't do, it's like Scooby Doo has to enter Johnny Bravo's world. Johnny Bravo can't enter Scooby Doo's world. I'm like, okay, if that's, sure, that's fine. I can totally deal with that. So when we got to do that, that was super cool. But then to record all the voices, that was amazing to see. If there's a video online, Butch Hartman put together this video from Johnny Bravo that has Casey Kasem doing Shaggy. Yeah. And it was amazing because he would do it, and I was like, what the heck? It's like, I don't even have to direct you. This is something that you're doing that is just like amazing. And it was just so much fun just having him there. And then we had Frank Welker doing Fred, and oh my gosh, I forget her name, who did the original Daphne was there.
Miss North.
Heather North.
Heather North, yes, thank you. I don't know why I blanked on that one, but I was like, it's there. I know it was North. I just couldn't remember the first name. But thank you for saving me right there.
They did, and so for them to do their stuff, but the thing. One second.
Okay.
So I wanted whatchamacallit? I wanted Don Messick to do Scooby Doo, but he had just had a stroke, so he wasn't able to do it. But prior to then, he was doing Droopy Master Detective. And the fun thing is that they had read-throughs before they did the records, and they did them upstairs in the main building. And I used to sit outside the door while they did the read-throughs and just listen to everybody do their thing. And I love listening to Don Messick just do his stuff. Anyways, one day I went over there and I brought something for Don Messick to sign. I'm like, I collect autographs and everything. So he did this thing. I don't know if you can see that.
Oh yeah.
He wrote, but he wrote Scooby Doody Doo. I don't know why he wrote Doody.
Yeah.
I was like, oh, can I erase that and put a B? So it says Scooby Dooby. But no, I just left it because I was like, oh, that's cute. But anyways, I wish I could have gotten to work with Don Messick, but I didn't get to work with him. But it was awesome to get all the all the voice people and just listening to them do their thing. That was just the coolest thing.
Did you feel like a kid again?
I totally did. When you're at Hanna-Barbera, you totally felt like a kid because everybody was there. Jerry Eisenberg was awesome. He's the guy who created Fang Face and all those other fun things and Wacky Races. Everyone loved him for Wacky Races. I loved him for Fang Face because that was more my childhood. I was the Wacky Races person. I had the appreciation for Wacky Races and everything. And the Banana Splits. That's what I loved about Jerry. It was his association with Banana Splits. But yeah, that was it was awesome because you could sit around and hang out with all the, like we had these, working at Hanna-Barbera was just the funnest thing, I just have to tell you. So because Joe was friends with everybody. So we'd have parties every month in the quad, in the parking lot. And they'd bring ice cream and bring cake and celebrate everybody's birthday. And there'd be random people there. My favorite time was when we saw this guy with the big beard, and Paul Rudish came up to me and goes, "Hey, who's Grizzly Adams over there?" And they're Adams. And I was like, "Oh, that's fun. That's Grizzly Adams hanging out over there." So it was just, you see, Lucille Bliss would come in all the time. You would see her at every Hanna-Barbera event. She was the voice of Smurfette, and she always wore something Smurfette-ish. And she loved doing the voice for everybody. "I'm Smurfette." You're like, okay, you're Smurfette. And she was just fun and eccentric. And it was just full of those kind of people. You know, your whole childhood was there. And you just had to go and talk to people, and you go in people's offices, and everybody had something amazing in there. You're like, what is that?
Yeah.
You have random collectibles and everything. Yeah, this, I don't know if you can see up there, there's the, from Charlotte's Web.
Yeah.
That was a background painting from Charlotte's Web. So on like my last day at Hanna-Barbera, Al Gamir, who was a painter on the show, he's like, "I know you've really always liked those. You've always loved Charlotte's Web. Why don't you take one?" I was like, okay. So he gave me an original background from Charlotte's Web. And I'm like, okay, you guys are awesome. You guys are cool.
Man, I got to imagine like that same, whenever I hear stories like that, I mean, this is how I feel when I get to talk to everybody I get to talk to. And like I said, I've said it so many times on this podcast, I'm pretty sure the fans are going to hate it, but there's nothing like, you know, smelling a dish that your mom or your grandma might have cooked for you when you were younger. There's nothing like hearing a voice like Casey Kasem or Don Messick or Frank Welker, even to this younger generation, or Billy West that played Shaggy in Scooby Doo, Zombie Island. You know, there's these voices we hear, these smells we smell that instantly transport us back to being a kid, right?
Yeah.
And then so many times I've heard so many different stories about what Hanna-Barbera was like, you know, during the 90s and the early 2000s and stuff like that, where it was this place of imagination, this place of fun. Obviously, you guys did a lot of work too, you know, but everybody was there for the same, like you guys enjoyed these cartoons. You guys were fans, and then fans got into the medium, and in the medium, you guys saw a love letter to the previous generation of animators and writers and voice actors, and then it translates into you guys' business. So I never get tired of hearing stories about people like myself, but I'm not an animator, I'm just a guy that likes to talk about this stuff. But people like you that got to meet their heroes and work with their heroes. I mean, you were the tour guide for Mr. Barbera's office, right? It's fucking wild, you know.
Well, you know what was funny was Maureen McCormick, who played Marcia Brady on the Brady Bunch. I don't know if you're a Brady Bunch fan. I was a huge.
I watched it when I was a younger, so I missed that generation. It wasn't for me.
I totally loved her. She came in and she showed up early for one of her records, and it was Christmas time, and she's like, "Oh, I could have showed up an hour later, but I had some Christmas shopping that I need to do." And I was like, "Well, you know what? Since you're here, we should go Christmas shopping in the studio. Just grab a box." And I took Maureen McCormick, like my favorite person. That's like, because I love the Brady Bunch. That's what I grew up on. And I took her to every office and every one of my friends' offices and said, "Hey, this is Maureen. you might know her from the Brady Bunch. She didn't get to do any Christmas shopping. You would happen to have something that you would like to give to her. And everybody always had something, like some sort of knickknack, and people would like fill up her box. And she's like, oh, thank you, thank you, thank you. And like Alex Kerwin, this one guy, it was his birthday. And so I got to bring her to his birthday party. He had a birthday celebration, like, Maureen McCormick's here for your birthday. So things like that were totally fun, and she got a kick out of it, and she got to go, and she came back with, like, we got to go into the Hanna-Barbera closet where she got to raid that, and so she didn't get to go shopping, but she got to come back with a ton of Hanna-Barbera, just toys and stuff like that. So it was just really fun and cool like that.
That's awesome. Like I said, I love hearing these type of stories, and each person always has a different story about, you know, who they got to work with, or who they, you know, who they idolized and who they went to for questions. You know, that's something that I don't get to bring up enough, but you being 23 years old at that time, like, I want to take it back to Johnny Bravo for just a second. 23 years old.
Oh yeah, there's that show.
Who would you lean? And I'm glad we got to talk about Scooby Doo, because there was quite a few fans that wrote in and wanted to know. That was my favorite episode, that one. And then one of the other ones that I absolutely love, whenever I think of Johnny Bravo, I always think of the Scooby Doo episode first, because that was my favorite episode of the entire series, because I love seeing Johnny and the gang come together, and then the fact that they both lost their glasses and they both looked for him, and that was a little love connection right there. Like, oh shit, this makes sense. You know, so I love that whole scene. And then the other one was where fucking Johnny was catfished by a deer. I don't know what season that was, but I love
that season one. That was Date with an Antelope. That was, you know, the internet had just come out at that point in time. Mm-hmm. Which is totally weird to talk about. It makes you seem so old. But we had Ted Turner brought Olive Turner, including Hanna-Barbera, out to the Cinerama Dome, and he pretty much explained to us what the internet was. Some of you maybe know that you're connected to these things, and you're doing inter-office talking and stuff like that. And he had this dream for a paperless society, and so at the end of the thing, he gave us all a book about the paperless society, and everyone proceeded to throw away their paper book into the recycling bin. But so,
did you keep it?
No, I threw mine away because it was not. Like I said, that was his dream. He wanted to kick Disney's ass. That was his quote, and have a paperless society. So.
Well, with the exception of some of the Disney movies, and I'm being facetious when I say some of the Disney movies, Nickelodeon tried to compete with Cartoon Network for a little while, but they only had a few shows that were really good, cartoon-wise. Cartoon Network ran just rampant. I mean, every person that I grew up with, it was Cartoon Network. We watched Hey Arnold on Nickelodeon. There was a few shows here and there on Nickelodeon. For the most part, Cartoon Network really ran the world when it came to cartoons. I mean, they have an entire network named after themselves. Cartoon Network. You know what I mean? So, excuse me.
You know that Craig Bartlett worked on our show on the 5th season, correct?
I did not. He's a hard man to get a hold of. Craig, the creator. So Hey Arnold was one of those.
Creator of Hey Arnold. Yeah, he was one of the writers on our show, because he had a deal at Cartoon Network at that point in time. And I'm like, hey, want to come work on my show? He's like, yeah, totally. So he was one of my writers, and he was fun. I loved Craig.
That's insane. I had Jim Lang on. Jim did the music for Hey Arnold, which is like synonymous. I mean, when you think of Hey Arnold, it's like 1A, 1B type of thing. You think of the music right away. You think of how great that show was, and then you think about the music. He had the coolest music, that acid jazz, when Jim Lang really broke it down and told me, you know, his whole style or his whole vibe. And same thing with Craig, as far as like what they wanted for a vibe for a show, as well as the music.
See, I love Craig because of the penny cartoons that he did on Pee-wee's Big Event, Pee-wee's Playhouse.
I didn't know he did those.
That was Craig.
Really?
Yes.
Wow. That's wild, man.
Yes, and he worked on the raisin commercials, the California raisin commercials and stuff.
Yeah, so. that came up with somebody I talked to. I didn't know that before, but when you said the raisins, yeah, that one's come up a few times. It's crazy.
But the penny ones, yeah, that's his.
What was it like? There's a few names that come up, and you brought up Butch. Seth as well, you've brought up. What was it like working? Was Hey Arnold already a thing when he came to work on Johnny Bravo? Did it already finish?
He worked on the 5th season, so he was in the last season of Johnny Bravo. So it was after Hey Arnold.
Well, okay, so Hey Arnold already concluded, because I was wondering if you can work for 2 different companies at one time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't think so. But working with all three of those guys, I mean, they're huge in this industry. You know, Seth being Family Guy, The Cleveland Show, American Dad, The Orville, and everything else. And then you got Butch with Danny Phantom, and then you got I can't believe I'm blanking, Fairly Odd Parents. I don't know why I blanked on that one. That one was right there. It just seems like whenever you got so much shit going on in your head, you're sitting there trying to collect all these things. It looks like all these files just keep flying away. That paperless society that Ted Turner.
It was fun. Mike Ryan, who I hired to be the head writer on our show, I just worked on one of his shows that's on Apple Plus right now. So that was a full circle moment.
Yeah, I can only imagine.
That was fine. We would have Zoom calls because I took pictures of everything. So I have tons of photos of like all the time. So I would just post pictures on the Slack channel that we have the inner office Slack thing. I'm like, here's Michael Ryan in his model Escadades. Here's his Billy Idol phase and all those different fun things.
That's
those
awesome.
Things make me laugh.
What was it like working with those two specifically, Seth and Butch on Johnny Bravo? I mean, obviously you know what you know now when it came to what they would go on to create and stuff like that. But what was it like in the early stages working with those two gentlemen?
It was fun. So when Seth came there, he was. Did they tell you his story about how he came?
Yeah, how he I think he won in college. He won the right to come over there to get his foot in the door to get to show his film and everything like that.
He won the Freddie Award.
Yeah.
It was only for RISD and UCLA because I gave out the UCLA award. But yeah, we shared an office for a while while he was making his short. So I had fun with him because we both like musical theater. So we would sing a lot of musical theater.
What was your go-to musical theater you're singing?
What
was your go-to one?
I had cassettes and stuff that I would play in the office and listen to Oklahoma and Music Man, stuff like that. Seth, I wish he had it. During on Steve Marmel's birthday, he rewrote You Got Trouble from the Music Man and roasted Steve with it. And it was the funniest thing. And I'm like, oh, I wish I had the words to that. It's like, I have it somewhere. I'm like, whatever, you're not going to find it. But yeah, Seth was fun. My favorite random thing was I won't tell that story. But yeah, both Butch and Butch, because Butch was older, so but Butch was awesome also, because it's kind of like the non-CalArts contingent, right? So Dexter's got greenlit, and so all the CalArts guys went there. Then Cow and Chicken got greenlit, and then everybody else went there, and then Johnny Bravo got greenlit, and I'd go like, who else is here? And so Butch and Seth were the last people that I was like, okay, I'd like those guys to be on the show. That would be awesome. Yeah, they were fun. We had such a great time. There's so many like random little memories that I have of it that I could talk about for days, because there were just so many funny, stupid things that we did. And that like my favorite thing, there was just a group of us. There was in Westwood, they had a film festival and they had the Music Man playing there. So a bunch of us hopped in a car and went and saw the Music Man. And it was just the funnest, cutest thing. Actually, I'll tell you one of my favorite stories. Mae Whitman, I don't know if you know who she is. She played Little Susie
I know
on
the
the show.
character, but yeah, I didn't know her by her name.
So she asked if we could go speak at her school in her class and talk about animation. I'm like, sure. And so, can we drive the Mystery Machine? And they were like, yeah. So I jumped through all the hoops to drive. I go, can I drive the Mystery Machine? They're like, no, you can't drive it, but we can have someone drive you. So we got in the car and we drove in the Mystery Machine. We drove down the freeway, which is the coolest thing. You drive down the freeway. Hey, I'm in the Mystery Machine. We just waved at people. Like, it's the coolest thing. And we got to the school and we drove up to the school. And all these kids start running out to the van and they're up against a fence, but we didn't realize the cop came up behind us and was following us as we're driving. We go, oh crap, I think we made like a wrong turn or we did something illegal. And then the cops pulled up and they're all, just want to see if Shaggy was in there. I'm like, no, we're just here for a school visit. Just bring the van. They're like, okay, great. And then they just went off. But we were totally freaked out about that. But yeah, we would do those kind of things. We have a fun miniature golf thing. And it's just, like I said, we were like really good friends during those times. And we just did a bunch of fun. And it was just all about hanging out and just doing dumb stuff. Like one day we had this Seth MacFarlane day where, because Seth's one eye is bigger, his vision was different. He has contacts now, but when you saw him, one eye was bigger. So we drew glasses with like one big eye and one small eye. And he always wore like button-up shirts with a t-shirt underneath it. And so everyone just dressed up like him and had paper glasses. Yeah, I have fun of that. But those guys always did impressions, which was always fun. And so they would just sit around and do impressions all the time of everybody. So they did. I think the impression of me was not flattering, but it was me.
Who did it better, Seth or Butch?
No, both of them did it the same.
Yeah.
They're both mimics, so it was fun.
What is that like? Because I mean, obviously you can't speak for those two specifically. But it's something I've always found super fascinating, because if we were having this chat, at the same table, Vice, over thousands of miles of internet connection, Ted Turner's world, it would be different, because I think we would do a lot of the same, because we're creatures of habit, but we also mimic. So, if you were laying off to the side, it would show a sense of like, oh, he's comfortable, so I'm going to do the same thing. Or if you got your arms crossed, I might do the same thing. So obviously with those two guys specifically, they're impressionists, they're mimic, they like to copy and add their twist. And what is that like, trying to work in the animation field? Does that mimic thing, does that happen? Did you see a lot of people trying to do the same kind of art with that, or were their art styles just completely different?
They're completely different.
Yeah.
They were the only two that would mimic anybody. I never really heard Craig or Genny or anybody do that. I think actually Genny can totally do Dexter. Genny can direct people like that. Craig can too, but I just have to say I've never heard them mimic people. I've heard them do voices and do that kind of thing.
Okay.
But the different creators that came through the studio that I can remember, they didn't. That wasn't the thing that they would just riff off of. I think Butch and Seth they just liked doing it.
Yeah, just to have fun, blow off steam and stuff like that. What was it like trying to wrangle in that writer's room? Whenever you're trying to get a show out and you got some stuff, you got a certain timeline to get something out. What was it like to wrangle those guys?
Here's the thing. We just were dumb. We just read stuff like, that's funny. That's funny. We didn't do our writer's room were just like read-throughs. And we never plussed them. And that's just something that, because I had never run a writer's room before.
Yeah.
So everyone was just like, that was cool, that was funny. there wasn't really much to fix. And so when I would get the script, I would rewrite them, but I wouldn't, in a writer's room, I didn't like, hey, what's a better joke here? What can be, I didn't know how to do that. So the writer's room was just a bunch of people sitting around. We just would come up with stories. We would just try and come up with something funny. That's more of what it was. And then they would go off and write it, and they were like, okay, that's great. I'm just going to edit it down to a good thing and maybe throw in some funny jokes or whatever, what I think is funny. And that's pretty much how it went.
Yeah, beautiful. And a couple more questions before we get to the fans' questions. And one we talked about before, but before we get to that part, did you, how do I ask? When Johnny Bravo is that first initial concept, was this something you thought of when you were really, really young? Or was Johnny Bravo something that you conceptualized once you got to art school, animation school, and you had to do that first student film?
That was my last student, that was my senior thesis project. So what happened was, I went away on a silent retreat. I went to Loyola Marymount University, and they had a silent retreat. So I was like, okay, I'm going to use that time and draw and listen to God and try and figure out what is it, what can I do, what can I come up with? And I came up with, I took all the things that I love, because my teacher pretty much told us, write what you know, do what you love, blah, 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 blah. So I'm like, okay, I'm gonna throw the kitchen sink at this one. So I love Elvis, that would be great. I loved Al Hirschfeld. The design was a riff on one of Al Hirschfeld's drawings. I took a bunch of Al Hirschfeld drawings and then I put glasses on them. I put the Ray-Ban aviator glasses because I think those were fun. I thought those were very Elvis-y. And I loved, there was a movie, a student film that I had watched at Loyola Marymount called The Magnificent Seven Elvis Impersonators. And I loved that concept. I thought that was funny. And then there was another show called The Three Santas. And there was like a big tall Santa, skinny Santa. I was like, okay, those two things, I could do the three Elvi, right? And then when I came up with the designs and realized that that's a lot of drawing, so I made one Elvi. And I saw the animation style that Bubba Cannon did in the Dover Boys. I was like, I can do that, strong poses, blah, blah, blah. So I did all of that. I watched Elvis things and I did it frame by frame, and I just kind of sketched out like the how it would look movement wise. I'd thumbnail out Elvis movements and put them into that film. Yeah, and so I did this film, and that's the one that which was funny because I didn't have a soundtrack to it, because back then you had to do it like on a mag tape and all the other stuff and record it and do all the different layers. And I didn't do it because I was really bad at school. And
me too.
I'm just making that up.
I was horrible.
Okay, well that's you. So yeah, I was late. So what I did, I had my friends who did the voices for me. I had them come up on stage. I got some of my musician friends, they came up on stage, and I did all the sound effects, and we played the film silent, and we just had a live reading of it, and it was just really fun.
That's pretty cool though. That's really cool.
It was very a multimedia extravaganza, and I think they used to talk about that in the animation department at LMU, and say Van was innovative and he did this project that was like multi-sensory. And I was like, no, it was because out of necessity. Yeah. Because I wanted to get a good grade. but because of that, I wasn't able to like enter the film in film festivals because I didn't really have a soundtrack. And then when Hanna-Barbera wanted to see it, I was like, oh, but I want to get all my friends' voices in there. And so the film that I showed them was me doing everybody's voices.
What's your Johnny Bravo sound like?
I don't, it sounds pretty much like you would think, amazing.
That is phenomenal. Speaking of Johnny Bravo, man, how did that name come about?
Um, it's my middle name, right?
Johnny or Bravo?
Both.
Really?
My full name is Ephraim Giovanni Bravo Partible.
Uh-huh.
So Ephraim is my first name. Giovanni, which is Italian for John.
Okay.
So, and then Bravo is my mom's maiden name. So my middle name is John. And then to cap that off, you have the Brady Bunch episode that they had a Johnny Bravo name. So it's like, well, there you go. It's kind of
Meant to be.
yeah.
That's really cool, man.
Just those things made me like, okay, I'll after myself also. So, and it's just a funny name.
I
like they wanted me to change the name, and I didn't want to change the name.
Do you know what they wanted to change it to?
They told me to come up with a bunch of different names, and I fought for it. And they said, okay, there's no trademark on it, but you can't just say Bravo because the Bravo network. I was like, that's fine, I can do that. So yeah, because of the Brady Bunch and stuff like that. I'm like, no, but it's my name. It's the cool thing. I like that. So anyways.
Excuse me. I like that, man. Going back to the Elvis part for just a second. What's your favorite Elvis song?
My favorite Elvis song is "If I Can Dream."
Yeah.
Yes, from the '68 comeback special, because it's just good. It's good stuff.
My granny was a huge Elvis fan, and I'm pretty sure it's because Elvis was up there gyrating his hips, the devil dance, if you will, what they used to call it back in the day. But I couldn't appreciate Elvis when I was younger. And as I got older, and as I've gotten older, and it's not like I'm super old, I'm only 32, but as I've gotten older, I've learned to appreciate what my granny would listen to. Like, my granny was so far ahead of her time back in the day. You know, she would listen to Elvis, and I'm pretty sure it's what she grew up listening to too. But a lot of the Temptations, a lot of the R&B and soul, and she would listen to a lot of funk as well. So all of these things that my granny used to listen to, that I remember, I don't remember the songs and everything, but I remember hearing like, oh man, I remember this. And then my mom would be like, yeah, that's what granny liked to listen to. And Elvis being one of them, the one that sticks out the most to me, because I don't know if it was her favorite song, but I just remember hearing it all the time. And it's my favorite Elvis song of all time, but "In the Ghetto" is a beautifully tragic. Like, that is one of the most visually, that song is like, you can close your eyes, you can listen to him talk, and then you can hear and see everything that he's talking about. And then you go and listen to all of his music, and it's a lot of the same thing. It's so sensory. You just sit there and you can close your eyes. You're like, fuck, dude, I can sit here. I'm a part of this song. I can see everything he's talking about. I can feel the strife. I can feel the happy. I can feel the dark. I can feel the light. I can feel all of this stuff. And just that song alone, it sticks out. And that one has always been my favorite. I don't know what it was about Elvis when I was younger, but like I said, as I've gotten older, I've just fallen down this rabbit hole of just listening to Elvis when I can, listening to him on the way to work. It's fun, man.
So you want to hear a random story about "In the Ghetto"?
Sure, I would love to hear a random song.
So the guy who wrote "In the Ghetto" is Mac Davis.
Okay.
So we had Mac Davis on the show, and that on the 5th season. Mm-hmm. And I was like, he was all excited because he wanted to do cartoon voices and everything like that. Yeah. And when he met Jeff Bennett, he goes, "Can just do it for me one time? Can you say my mom was mashed potatoes?" And then Jeff Bennett, my mom's mashed potatoes, and he goes, "Yeah, that's it." like, because he knew Elvis, right? And so we were just talking about stuff, and I go, "Hey, congratulations on whatchamacallit had just come out, the Little Less Conversation, and it just hit #1. He's like, yeah, someone just told me that. They're like, hey, man, congratulations on #1 song. He's like, what song are you talking about? And he's like, yeah, I wrote that like in the 60s. What do you mean it's #1? It was the #1 song at the time over in Europe, the remix. So anyways, Mac Davis was amazing because he wrote In the Ghetto. He also wrote Little Less Conversation, which was cool. But when he came, he brought his guitar because he used to have a TV show back in the 70s where at the end of the show, he would find someone in the audience and they'd tell them their name and they'd say something about themselves and he'd write a song right there about them. And so when he came, I'm like, hey, could you play some music? And we put the record mic by there. And he goes, yeah, I knew it was going to happen. He's like, because everywhere I go, any party that I go to, they always make sure that I bring my guitar because everyone wants me to sing. And so he performed. I still have the recordings of the songs that he did for us. He performed Little Less Conversation, the version he wrote it for Aretha Franklin. And so he performed the Aretha Franklin version for us. And it was just so cool just to know. And I asked him about Elvis. I'm like, what do you remember about, do you have any like random Elvis stories? Because that's cool. And he told us the story about how he went to go to a theater to go watch a movie with Elvis. And when he got to the theater, it's like Elvis was sitting up here and all his people were in the back. And Mac went up and he went straight over to Elvis and sat next to him. They're like, oh, you're not supposed to sit next to Elvis and stuff like that. Because Elvis got up and left to go to the bathroom or something. And one of his bodyguards came up to him and it's like, you know, you're not supposed to sit up here. It's like, you're supposed to go back there. And Mac's like, what are you talking about? And when Elvis came back, Mac was like, Elvis, you know what these guys told me? They said, I can't sit up here. They said, I can't be here. I was like, what is that about? And I was like, no, you can sit up here. What are you doing? He's like, you're surrounded by people that, I don't know who they are or what they're doing to you, man, but it's not, I don't think it's good for you. He's like, then who can I trust? He's like, well, you can call me. He's like, well, what number should? He's like, or we can switch numbers. He's like, and Elvis goes, hey, tell me what's the number that you guys call me on? And they tell him the number. He's like, no, not that number. The number for me, to me. And then they gave him Mac Davis' number. So Elvis wrote down the phone number for Mac Davis on a matchbook. Said, yeah, here's my number. Call me whenever you want. And I go, where's that matchbook? He's like, I don't know, somewhere. It's like, what? Elvis wrote down his phone number on a matchbook and you lost it? What's that about? So anyways, that's my random Elvis story that I was able to get. And also one other one, because we're talking about Elvis. The Hard Rock Cafe at one point was going to put Johnny Bravo on their kids menu. And I met with the owners of the Hard Rock Cafe and everything, or their PR team, whoever it was. And they were like, hey, want to hear an Elvis story? I'm like, yeah, tell me one. They go, we met the police officers who went on a stakeout with Elvis because Elvis wanted to be a police officer. And so he wanted to go on a stakeout. So these police officers, Elvis came along with them on a stakeout. They're all, this is boring. He's like, it's okay, guys. And he put on a mask so no one would recognize him. He didn't want anyone to recognize him. So he sat in the back the whole time and they just talked and everything. Nothing happened that night. But when he took off the mask, he had broken out in hives because he was allergic to whatever was on the thing. And they felt so bad about it and everything. But the next day, the cops got a call from Elvis, just thanking him for like the best night of his life. And they're like, oh, we felt bad that he had got a giant rash from the mask that he wore. So anyhow, I just exhausted my Elvis stories, didn't I?
Oh no, man. If if I've learned anything, I think it's that one, I need to clear my throat. God damn. It's one that we need to have a segment on here, and it's called Van's Random or something along those lines. And then we just have Van, submit a little 30-second story, and we put that on each episode from now on, because this is what I love about podcasts. This is what I love about not having, somebody standing behind me telling me what I'm allowed to talk about, what I need to ask, and all this other shit. This is what you get from a conversation vice bullet points. Like, where'd you come up with your show? How'd you do it? Obviously, I'm going to ask some of those questions, but those questions, if you haven't noticed, are kind of secondary, man, because I want to know about you. I want to know why you created what you created, how you created what you created, but what also went into, what part of Van went into whatever Van was working on at that point in time, or whoever I have on, what went into that. And it always goes in an interesting direction. And interesting to me, one of two things can be really weird and really fucked up, or really cool. But weird and cool and fucked up is always crazy, and it's always fun, because you never know where it's going to go, who's going to bring up what. I've had over 60, 70 guests on. Never once have I had an Elvis story, let alone 2 or 3 Elvis stories. I've had plenty of guests on, and I've never had, I think I might have had one, Mr. Barbera story, but I haven't had that many. We hear more about, Joe, or we hear more about him, and we hear more about Will, excuse me, or Bill. So it's fun seeing, like I said, what you guys remember, what you guys bring into it, and what makes you, man. Elvis, Johnny Bravo wouldn't be Johnny Bravo without Elvis. He was such a huge influence. And then Johnny Bravo wouldn't be Johnny Bravo without you, man. Because your fucking name is in it, is what I'm getting at, Van. 2 of your names are in there, So it's like I said, I really enjoy the stories that you've shared with me. And this is one of my favorite parts of the podcast, is getting to have the fans get a piece of Van, if you will. They want to pick your brain a little bit. We got some really good questions, some questions that I had to just completely not bring up because they're asked every single time. Mesa Blues is being one of them. I guess we will talk about it a little bit. I mean, when we talked, do you want to tell them what you told me about class and everything like that? I mean, I don't want people to.
No, it's fine. Whatever. Okay. I usually reserve showing the Mesa Blues to my animation classes, because I would rather show them something that they haven't seen. It's not that exciting to show something that's already on YouTube that they can see whenever they wanted to. So it's kind of a special thing for me to share with people, and I can talk to them about the details and what went on with it. And it's just kind of a fun thing, which is why I never posted it on anything.
And I appreciate that.
Most I don't care about, like I said, I've shown it tons of places. When I go out, if some people want to see it, I have it on my computer hard drive. So if someone's, if you're hanging out with me, it's like, hey, do you have that? I'm like, yeah, you want to see it? It's not that big a deal or anything, but people ask me to post it, but it's just something that I rather just keep for sharing viewing. So, because you don't really get a lot of that nowadays. There's nothing really special so much when it's out in the public eye. So it's just kind of a little fun thing that I'd like to share with people. So I'm not trying to hide it or anything like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I do have the only copy. So if everyone's, because I've saw this one website that was talking about it, and they were hunting for it, and they hunted at my school for it, like it was in some sort of archives. I'm like, no, I only had one videotape of it, and then I digitized that videotape, and then I have a whole. That's pretty much. So it's not going to go anywhere, and it's on my hard drive. So if I pass away and people are like, hey, whatever happened to that? They can go, hey, Van's children, there's a film on his hard drive.
That's something that I think, because you just said it, there's nothing really sacred anymore. There's nothing very special anymore. With streaming services, it's like, give it to me now type of thing. I want to be able to watch it when I want to watch it, right? So I think that's very important to have something like that, because if you put everything out there, like you said, it doesn't have as much meaning, to you or to everybody else, if you can just go Mesa Blues YouTube and you can just pull it up and anybody can watch whatever. So it's an occasion, it's like what going to the movies used to be. right? Before you could stream it, like going to the movies to me is my Disney World. Like I love like being able to take my oldest son to go to a movie, and we're going to go for the first time since COVID on Halloween. I'm hoping we'll see something good. I'm letting him pick it out. So it's 50-50. He's got some interesting, interesting views, but no, so we're going to go see our first movie since before COVID, excuse me, with this weekend on Halloween. But that it's something special, because before all of these streaming sites were coming up, that was an event. You would go and you would see it, and then 6 to 8 months later you would get it on DVD or VHS when I was growing up, and then DVD later, Blu-ray now, and now it's on streaming, so you can stream it the same day it comes out in the movie theater. So I don't want to say it's lost its lack, or it's lost its meaning, or it's lost that magical factor, but there is something special, and something like what I'm getting at is I'm applauding you for holding on to that, because there's so many people that would just sell their souls out and like, fuck it, I'm just going to put up there so I can have all of the attention, so everybody can say, hey, look at this, look at this, look at this. And it's something special to sit there and say, you know what, it's mine, I'm going to do what I want to do with it. And fans, if you want to see it, sign up for his class. He just told you how to get the blueprint, man. So if you want to see how the sausage is made, sign up for Van's class. We'll put that link in here. So if you want to take an animation class taught by Van, you can do that, and you can see Mesa Blues. And like I told you before we hit record, I didn't know anything about that until I posted that picture of Johnny Bravo and asking for fans questions. The other one that I wanted to talk about, and we can talk about as much as you want to talk about it, and I know you said don't ask you your opinion on it, but I want you to talk freely, because there's so many people that when I saw this question, I went and just YouTubed it. And there's so many people that aren't named Van Partible. Did I say your last name correctly? I forgot to ask you before. Is it Partible? Okay, I just want to make sure, because there's one thing.
When you're Filipino, your name is, you can say it two different ways. You can say it in the Filipino way, Partible, or you can say it the American way, Partible.
No, I'm gonna say a Partible. I want to feel I'm well traveled. I'm well versed.
You're a Navy guy.
Yeah, so I've been around. So Partible, I like that, man. It makes me sound like I've seen
exotic.
Yeah, fuck yeah, man. It makes me sound like I don't look like I got vanilla face. Like I'm not as white as Mayo. Partible, man, that's a cool fucking name. So like I said, when I posted this question, I asked for fans. The one thing I didn't know was you came off of season 1. Now, when I saw that, I was like, what the fuck are they talking about? And then a couple other people asked, I'm like, all right, well, this must be a Mesa Blues thing. So I Googled Mesa Blues, and then I Googled, that. And then I saw that other people were talking about it, but Van wasn't talking about it. So what happened? And like I said, you could talk about it as little or as much as you'd like. I don't want to push you, because this isn't meant to be negative or anything like that. I just did not know about this at all until today, really. So from your perspective, what happened, man? I would love to know your side of the story is what I'm getting at.
Well, from my perspective, they just put a whole other crew on Johnny Bravo. That's pretty much it. They wanted to see how it, I mean, if you go back, you mentioned my age, I was 23, 24. Actually, at that point in time, I was 26 when we did the first season. And we didn't have the proper teaching, I guess, to run a show.
Yeah.
Like my first producer, Byron Bonds, he left a couple of months in, and then we got Cause Anzalotti, and he was my producer, but he didn't know much about the show. They just put him on there. So he wasn't like mentoring or anything like that. A really great mentor for the short show was Larry Huber, who was the producer on Dexter. So he was also the producer on all the shorts. So he was teaching everybody how to run a show, how to be a producer, and blah, blah, blah. So I never got to know how to be a producer. So we were just a bunch of kids running around doing things. And like I said, it could have been better. So it's all pretty much raw talent. So at the same time, it was just fun. I just wanted to have fun, and everybody wanted to have fun. So we were just making a funny cartoon and anything that made us laugh. So when the second season came up, Warner Brothers had bought Hanna-Barbera, or Warner Brothers took over Hanna-Barbera. And so in between first and second season, there was I don't want to call it a snafu or whatever you want to call it. They felt like that I didn't have enough experience to run a show, because Warner Brothers was Warner Brothers, and they came in and they pretty much just said, I hear there's been trouble on this show, so if you want, we can take it over. So they just took it over, and I was kind of put to the wayside, and they said, we'll see how this goes. And I was like, okay, we'll see how it goes. And the nice thing was, when it ran its course, I was pitching shows again after, and I went back to Cartoon Network after them. There was this time period, because I was talking with one of the producers out there, and he was like, because he was asking me about my opinion on JBVO. I don't know if you remember that show.
No, I don't. I saw a question in there. I just thought it was a typo. But what was JBVO?
JBVO was a call-in cartoon show hosted by Johnny Bravo, where kids would call in and they say, hey, play this cartoon. Johnny would do something funny, and then they'd play the cartoon. And so they asked me, like, what would you have done? What are your thoughts on it? And I gave my thoughts. And all that would have been good. I wish we could have talked to you, but that was the time period where we couldn't talk to you. And I was like, oh, I didn't know there's a time period you couldn't talk to me. Okay.
Did they say why there was the time they couldn't talk to you?
No, it's not like I pursued it. But after that, we what did we do? Oh, I was pitching a show, and then to Linda Sminsky and Khaki Jones. And they pretty much said, we were just thinking, we were wondering what it would be like to see what you would do with Johnny Bravo now that you've had some producing time to have some experience under your belt, kind of thing. I go, cool. So I pitched them a Christmas special, a Johnny Bravo Christmas special, and they liked it. And so they did it, and they thought it was funny, and they loved it. It was really sweet. Khaki Jones is just the most amazing person. And the thing that meant the most to me when we did that, they had an all-staff meeting, and they showed this thing where they're showing the previews of all the shows that are coming up at Cartoon Network. And I put up for the Johnny Bravo Christmas special, I took a still of a Charlie Brown Christmas, and I put Johnny's head on Charlie Brown. And I said, Johnny Bravo Christmas. And I got a good laugh from the audience. And Khaki said, that's why we love you, Van. And I was like, oh, that's really sweet. And that like made me feel all goosey bump. And so, yeah, so we did that. And that they said that half-hour special was really cool. I got to bring back Chris Zimmerman and got to work with all the voices, and that was really special. And then I did the Valentine's Day special. And then right at that time, The Rock called. I don't know if anyone's ever talked about this.
Yeah.
The Rock called and said that he wanted to do a Johnny Bravo movie and wanted to meet with me. It's like, cool. Because what had happened in Ebony magazine a while back, he in his interview, he basically said, they asked him this question, what do you like to do in your spare time? He said, I like to play Willie Nelson songs and watch Johnny Bravo. I was like, oh, that's fun. Yay, I'm one of his two favorite things at the time.
What year is this? I don't mean to cut you off, but what year is this?
This is probably 2001 or 2002.
Okay, so this is right around the time where he's starting to make that transition into Hollywood.
Yeah.
So obviously he's not as
he had just finished The Scorpion King.
Yeah, that was a flop.
So,
I loved him in Walking Tall, though.
no, Scorpion King put him on the map, so that's why everyone was like, "Oh, we got to do something with him." And so, yeah, and so when that happened, I went back to the Cartoon Network and I said, hey, if we're going to be doing this movie, we should have some Johnny Bravo cartoons to like coincide and develop and do that. And so we can air these cartoons at the same time the movie comes out. Wouldn't that be awesome? They're like, yes, that would be awesome. That would be great synergy. And so they greenlit another season of Johnny Bravo that I got to produce. So
during all of that time, you said you were 26. Now, obviously, we're not the same person because how you think and how I think and how you feel and how I feel is completely different. However, obviously, when you create something and you sell it, it's Cartoon Network to do with whatever they please. I mean, they could fire a creator. I mean, look at John Kay with Ren and Stimpy. They could bring somebody new in. They could change everything if they really wanted to. So me just being the emotional, personal guy that I am, I would be very upset, and very little words is what I'm getting at, that something that I created, because when you create something, it's a piece of you, right? Whether somebody can say, yeah, it's a piece of you. There's so much, output for this character and that character, so much collaboration. But at the end of the day, what you created is a piece of you, right? So in a sense, it's an extension of you. So if I were to give myself, to somebody else and them cut the cords, I don't know if I could be as civil. And I don't know if you were civil or if they were civil or however it went, because it was a long time ago. It's none of my business. It's between you and them. I would just feel some kind of way about it. With that being said, how did you get past that to come back on? I mean, I got to imagine there was a lot of raw emotion and feelings there, because I'm pretty sure you were kind of upset being a 26-year-old man, with all that testosterone going through your system. I got to imagine you were pretty hot about that, So just knowing the basics that I know about science and all that other shit that I just said with testosterone and all this other stuff, what was your mindset like? What was your head like? I mean, did it feel like they were fucking with you when they cut you and then they bring you back? Or did it feel like redemption, getting to come back and finish it up? Or what were you feeling during that time of absence?
All of this stuff.
Yeah.
How it's pretty much like my favorite. No, it's not even my favorite. There are just moments that you remember, like in Entertainment Weekly, we did a photo shoot. So I did a photo shoot where I was with Johnny Bravo, and then David Feast did one where he was with Cow and Chicken, and then Gendy did one where he's with Dexter and Dee Dee. And the Entertainment Weekly article came out, and the pictures of David and Gendy were in. Mine wasn't in there. And I was all, oh, okay.
Did they ever tell you why? Was it after?
Yeah, I was already fired off the show by then.
Oh, okay. I got you.
So there are things like that you're like, okay. It's funny because I did my photo shoot and I have the picture, but it was supposed to be for that spread. So it was one of those things that you're like, okay, how are you supposed to feel about those things? So you go to a lot of therapy, you pray a lot. It's like, and yeah, it's kind of like, what is God? God puts me in this position now. What am I supposed to learn from it? And that's what it was. It wasn't about people are evil, people are horrible. It's like you experience things and you're like, there's a lesson that I'm supposed to be learning here. What is that? And that puts you in a better place than having a lot of anger and stuff. But I mean, that was there too. So I'd be like pitching to like places and my anger would come out and I'm like, and it's like you don't know if you can tell people about certain things. And so you had a sort of a secret, because it's like you're still got a show, but your name's attached to it. But yeah, for the most part, it's pretty much, yeah, you kind of deal with what's been given and try and figure out how yeah. I mean, like I feel, well, I know it's like God redeems all. Mm-hmm. And so he did redeem that situation, but it was more that time period was a difficult position to be in, especially with the show going and it being successful and people attaching your name to it or attaching yourself to it and asking you. And yeah, it's kind of okay. So I guess if you can imagine that you had a kid and then your kid was adopted by someone else and they were making choices that you that weren't the choices that you would have made, then you're like, okay, that's them. People still like them, people still enjoy it. So I don't like fault anybody that likes those things or to fault the producers. The producers did a great job. They produced a show that people really loved, but it's like I can't take credit for that version of it, even though I do get, it's like someone complimenting you on something that you didn't do.
Yeah.
Is kind of an awkward thing. So yeah, it's a multi-layered thing, but getting through it, it took a lot of therapy and prayer.
I mean, it's like I said, I'm not proud of it, but I think I would have held a grudge for a very long time. Like, I'm just one of those people, and I've had this talk before, so I apologize ahead of time. My father wasn't in the picture at all growing up. Never. He went to prison when I was real young. He tried to, he tried, air quotes, to come back into my life when I was younger. Tried to do it last year when he had cancer. But it's just like, once that damage, for me specifically, and like I said, I know we're completely different people. But once that damage for me specifically is done, it's very hard for me to trust somebody again. I can't go out on the ledge because I was hurt so deeply,
Yeah,
so long. And like, I would go to bat for this man on a consistent basis. Like, I knew he was a druggie. I knew he was an alcoholic. I knew he didn't want kids, but like, at a young age, man, your dad's your hero until he's not. Right.
yeah.
And the only reason I bring up that story is I don't know, like, for me specifically, I don't know if I could go to enough therapy or if I could pray enough. And like I told you, I'm not a really religious person because of, a whole bunch of different things. I mean, if you want to, we could talk about it, but most people don't want to hear that. I don't know if I could pray to somebody, I don't know if I could ask those questions. And like I said, I tried to reconcile with him last year, and he would call and we would talk, and I'd pep him up, I'd prep him up or prop him up and stuff like that when he was having bad days, when he was going through chemo. And then it was just his stepmom, or not his stepmom, my stepmom.
Your stepmom.
Yeah, sent me a message that was so condescending, and it was trying to guilt me into calling somebody and having a relationship with somebody that I tried to for 25 years to have a relationship with. And I couldn't. Like, I look back on it now, and like, like, I haven't talked to him in a few months. And I used to call him like every Monday, or I'd call him like every couple of days, and he'd call me and all this other shit. And it was just like, every time I would hear that voice, like, I would flash back, and like, he never molested me, never beat me, none of that shit, but it's just an emotionally absent parent is just as fucking, I don't want to say just as detrimental as a physically or a molester or stuff like that, because everybody deals with stuff differently, and each one doesn't cancel out. Not one is greater than the other, but molesting a kid is just too far for me. But that didn't happen. But what I'm getting at is how long did it take you to get rid of that pain? Because I still carry that with me. I can't let that go. And it's just something that I don't think I can ever let go. I tried. I wrote down, I've got a little yellow pad that I have here. I wrote down like 7 or 8 fucking pages, front and back, on everything I wanted to say to him, everything I thought I could say to him. And my intention was to mail that letter off.
Mhm.
Then I find out he's got cancer. Then I find out he's dying. Then I find out he got a piece of his lung taken, and they think he's in the clear. And then he finds out that it's metastasized to his liver because of alcohol, pills, and all this other shit. And I thought I could send it, and then I just threw it away. And then I started thinking, like, fuck, man, is this really worth carrying? Right? Is it worth the corrosion that something like that carries? Is it worth it? And at the end of the day, it's like, man, if I put it in the back of my mind, I don't think about it. When I smoke too much weed and all of that stuff I've been repressing, that starts to come to the forefront. Then I start thinking, man, am I really doing the right thing? So the only reason I told you that was like, I'm trying to wrap my head around how some people cope or how some people get through probably the dark. Would you say, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but would you say was that probably one of the darkest times of your life, just getting taken off of your show?
Yeah, I could say that.
Okay.
Because it's kind of like I said, I birthed something, and it was something that I enjoyed, and I was able to control this character, and
Yeah.
I knew what was funny about him, and I knew there was a lot of things that I didn't tell people about him because that was my thing.
Mhm.
So like Butch and Seth would write something, and I knew it was wrong, but I didn't know how to verbalize it because I didn't know as much about me as I needed to, or I knew much about the human condition as I do now. So it's like I would scratch out the line that they wrote and I would write something else. And it would be because I knew the character better than all of them. And I didn't know how to explain the character to them. I just knew that this he would say here, this is what he would actually do. And so that's why when everyone was throwing out jokes, it's like, you know what, I'll fix it. Just give it to me and then I'll just go rewrite it. And that's all that I ever did, was just rewrite everybody's stuff because I knew the character, but I didn't know how to verbalize why I knew the character or how I knew the character. So when you lose that control and you watch it go off, not necessarily off the rails, you watch it go in a direction that you're like, I would have rewrote that, I would have retimed that, I would have put them in a different situation because that's not the character that I created. That's not the world that he would get involved in. He wouldn't be put in that position. He wouldn't have reacted that way.
Yeah.
It's hard to watch that. And as far as getting past it, you never really get past it.
Yeah.
Like the more, when you talk about it, it brings it all up. But it's pretty much, you learn to live with it, kind of like a disability. You're like,
Yeah.
this is what is, it's part of your life. And it does, I think my relationship with God is like huge in that respect, that I can turn to him and say, you know, this is, it's like, I need help at this time.
Yeah.
I don't understand what's going on. I want to, it's like, I need clarity, or I need something to help me process all this. And it's more about, you know, forgiveness. It's about having grace for people, having grace for yourself, all that stuff. So it's not, it's like you could get angry about it and you could hate all the people involved and all that other good stuff or bad stuff. But at the end of the day, all that stuff is living rent free in your house, in your head.
Yeah.
And you're like, why are you, that doesn't need to be there. And it's like, those are the things that you need to work through. You need to grieve them and all that stuff. Like when they gave the show back, I was like, okay, this is what I would do with it. And for me, it was awesome because I could do this I can do the show. I go, this is how the show would look. You had problems with the design. So I hired Dan Haskett, who designed everything in the world.
Yeah.
From, I don't know if you know his whole history. He designed Belle, Little Mermaid, everything. He did The Simpsons, Batman the Animated Series, everything that you can possibly imagine. I go, how would you design Johnny Bravo? And he designed them.
Yeah.
Or had Von Tata, this new storyboard, has designed some stuff. It's like I just had people like fix all the things that I couldn't fix before because I didn't know better, I guess.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And then that 5th season was like the funnest season because all the people that I wanted to hire, I hired. We just had fun every month, every week. If you ever get a chance to talk to Craig Bartlett, I think he wrote in an article, they're like, what was it like working with Dan? He's like, it's like a party every week. Because it was. I would throw all kinds of stuff. We threw fondue parties, we threw music parties, my favorite time was one of the things we did on 5th season, we did this thing called Alex Almaguer Day. So I took, first of all, we took his driver's license picture and we blew it up to be about 8 feet tall, made color copies of it. Then we made color copies of a mask, and we put them all in popsicle sticks. His girlfriend got all of Alex's shirt because Alex liked to wear these button-up shirts, and he gave them to all the crew. So all the crew was wearing Alex's shirts. We had, and then we created Alex Almaguer Day. So I created a certificate declaring it Alex Almaguer Day. Tom Kenny came in as the mayor of Townsville of Cartoon Network, and he announced it officially, Alex Almaguer Day. Mae Whitman was there to present him with the girl who played Little Susie presented him with the certificate. We put him on one of those dollies, and he went through everybody. Everyone had bubbles, and we did a little parade down the thing. We did karaoke that day, and then we got Miss Burbank came. I called up the whole pageant area. Like, could Miss Burbank come to this thing? They're like, yeah, she can. So they gave me her number, and she's like, should I bring my sash and tiara? We're like, yes, you should bring your sash and tiara. So she came and she presented the certificate. Well, I don't know. No, May presented the certificate. She presented something. I forget what she did. I think she dubbed it.
Yeah.
Made it official because she was Miss Burbank. So yeah, we did fun things like that. When my producer, she was getting married, so we had tons of parties. We did a wedding reception for her. We did, because she was also one of the producers on Samurai Jack. So we had the Samurai Jack crew and Johnny Bravo crew. We threw a big party for her. We decorated. We went to, Roscoe's Chicken and Waffles, and we put out doilies and all this other stuff. And we did a party there for her. And then when she was gone every day, we took a picture of her office, but we redecorated it. Like, today there's an alien, and we covered everything in tinfoil. And then another day we had all the accountants there measuring everything. Another day we had, we put like the big giant doll from Powerpuff Girls. There's a bunch of stuff that we did. So I always tried to keep it fun. And yeah, anyways.
Yeah, Craig would be a great guy to have on, man. His manager's a little tough to persuade, but that's neither here nor there, man. One day he'll be on here. I have faith. But thank you for opening up just a little bit, man. Because I know, like I said, I got a little personal there, and I get comments every once in a while where people are like, man, it's not about you, it's about them. But when you're having a conversation, I don't want to say you open up, but you do open up, man, because it's a conversation shouldn't be one way. You know what I mean? It's reciprocal. It's give and give. It's just making everything a little bit more personal. And plus, at the end of the day, man, just like Johnny Bravo, this show is my fucking show, so I'm gonna do whatever I want to do. So it all depends on. Yeah, it all depends on where we're gonna go. So I know we've been talking here for like a little bit. I didn't mean to keep you this long, so I apologize for that. So we'll get through as many fans' questions as possible. So first thing that comes to your mind, just rattle it off. And if you don't want to talk about it, we'll just hit the pass. And some of these names, I apologize in advance, are very difficult to pronounce. Facundo wants to know, any story about trouble with merchandising during Johnny Bravo?
They did not merchandise it because they did not know how to sell a masochistic womanizer to kids.
Man, can you now there's a few fans' questions in here. What would Johnny Bravo look like now? Obviously, we're not getting the same show because times have changed. But if you could take a snapshot of what Johnny Bravo was in the 90s and then transport him into 2021, what would your vision be for Johnny Bravo in today's climate?
Being the same. I mean, if you can imagine, well, you can't imagine. Look at Austin Powers.
Perfect example. I like that correlation between those
So
two.
there you go. That's what
Um,
the Rock wanted. He told me that he wanted Johnny Bravo to be his Austin Powers. So
please tell me you've got some fucking pull to make this happen. I mean, I know he's out here making Shazam Van, but please, 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 please make that happen, because there's quite a few people that wanted to know about the live action. And like I said, like I thought it was just a meme. I thought it was like a rumor type of thing. I didn't know there was actually, you know, I don't want to say some shit going on, but there was some, you know, at least some talks going, said, hey, I mean, he likes Johnny
we went
Bravo.
and visited him. We visited him on the set of The Rundown when it was called El Dorado.
Fantastic movie.
Yeah, he was fun. Met his. We had a bunch of talks. I gave him a line. He's like, "Can I use that?" I'm like, "Yeah, okay, you can totally use that."
You remember which line it was?
Yeah, it was Johnny was at the library, and he went up to a girl, and she was reading a book, and he takes the book away, and he goes, "If you want something better to read, read my mind."
You can see The Rock saying that shit too.
Yes. He loved it. Anyways, next.
Beautiful, man. We talked a little bit about it, but Billy wants to know, is there any news on viewing on the streaming platforms for Johnny Bravo?
No one said anything to me, so
I feel like they're really missing out there. Zachary wants to know, and this is a pretty good one. Were you unsure if kids would get all of the Elvis references?
no, because that wasn't part of the agenda. The agenda was to make it funny.
Gotcha.
So what do you think? They always kept telling me, "What do you think is funny?" I'm like, "This is funny." Okay.
That works.
It wasn't about making sure people liked it. I mean, we did the same focus group that everyone told Craig McCracken that
he should quit.
It was an awful cartoon. That was fun. Me and Gendy and Craig, we flew out to Arizona for that focus group. And so all three of them got focus tested. Dexter's was like across the board, awesome. But Powerpuff was kind of like they either really loved it or they really hated it. And that was the same as Johnny Bravo. The kids really either loved it or really hated it. And the thing about that is it sparked an emotion in them, and that's what they liked. They didn't want any lukewarm stuff in it. So it ranked up. They said that's the kind of thing that Ren and Stimpy did. It's like that's how it tested, the same as Ren and Stimpy.
Yeah, that's a good thing to kind of get compared to. I mean, it did some nice little views over there on Nickelodeon. Peter wants to know. No, we already answered that one because it was about Butch and Seth. Man, Bakugan. I always
Bakugan.
It's BAKAKOUJIN.
Sure.
Yeah, that'll work, man. I hope if anybody know it. They want to know, what was your experience with Ed Benedict?
My experience with Ed Benedict was awesome. He was a good friend of mine. Like when Byron Vaughn's actually brought him in, he's like, "We've been talking to him. Would you like him to mentor you? Would you like him to be a character designer?" I was like, "Sure."
Yeah.
So I called him up. I'm like, "Hey, Ed, we'd like to draw like you," because we were trying to get the old Hanna-Barbera style down. Yeah. He's like, "There's no Hanna-Barbera style." I go, "I wanted to get that Ed Benedict style." That's what I said. He goes, "There's no Ed Benedict style." I go, "Yeah, there is." He's like, "Well, I can't tell you about it. It's like seeing a beautiful woman and then trying to tell somebody about her. It's like, I have to show you." I go, "Okay." So they said, Byron was like, "We should fly you up there." I go, "Okay." So they flew me and Julian Cheney up to Carmel. And I lived up in Salinas, so it was nice because it was just a few miles away, so I could stay in Salinas. but I could just drive up to Carmel and hang out with Ed Benedict. So Ed Benedict gave us, he's like, I told you on the phone, anyways, he's a crabby old man, but he was really nice. His home was amazing. He had like amazing drawings. He had files, he kept everything. Really cute. Every year he would create a new sculpture of a rabbit for Easter for his wife. Mm-hmm. And he had a collection of these really amazing rabbits, which were cool. He had a drawing by Grim Natwick of Betty Boop on his wall. That's the only drawing that he had. And he had files and files of drawings. And then we sat there and he taught us how to draw.
Yeah.
He's like, I have a drawing that he did of, this is how Pebbles would have been designed if I designed Pebbles. He's like, that's not how I would have designed her. Showed me all kinds of cool stuff. I kept all the drawings that he drew. The first drawing he did, he threw away and Julian pulled it out of the garbage when he wasn't looking. I used to have a cigarette and he'd smoke it and then he'd put it down and then he just let the ash just go. He just watched it. It was just the funniest thing. He'd take another puff and there'd just be big long ash on there. But we became good friends because I lived in Salinas. Every time I went to Salinas, I would go visit Ed and we just sit and talk.
That's really
cool. Talk about everything. I became really good friends with him and his family. When he passed away, ABC News called me and they're like, George Stephanopoulos does this thing on Sundays where he talks about, he does a section and there's a tribute to people who passed away that week. And Benedict, we want to put Ed on there. Do you have any pictures? I was like, sure. So I gave him some pictures and I talked with his kids. And so I drove up there with Julian to his kids' house and we all watched the George Stephanopoulos show together. And that was really, really cool.
Yeah.
And we got to go through all his stuff. Like when he passed away, me and Julian actually went up there because his son was like, I don't know what this stuff is. So if you want to clean out his office, I'd be you can be our guest. So me and Julian totally drove up there.
Yeah.
And we helped them pack also. And we got to go through all his stuff. We're like, oh my gosh. And his son was like, I didn't know he did that. He never talked about that. And we'd see all these things that Ed worked on. Like, what is this? And it was like rummaging through his archives. Was amazing. So yeah, he was like a good friend, good mentor. Like when he was really sweet. Like he'd call me up and he goes, I was looking at all the designs for this water cartoon thing and Johnny stood out. It's like, that's the one, that's where my eye went. I was like, oh, thanks. That was like the sweetest thing that he could say. Like if you look at, and it was everybody's, all the drawing, all the cartoons were up there. And that's the one that he was just really a really nice guy. I have a bunch of recordings of him because I did some, I was writing a Cartoon Network book. And yeah, that's kind of a crazy one because I was writing this Cartoon Network book and I interviewed like over 100 people about the history of the Cartoon Network. So if you want to know what the history of the Cartoon Network is, I pretty much, that was a fun one because I interviewed as many people as I could. I interviewed from the people who, like the guy who convinced Ted Turner to buy the Hanna-Barbera library. He had some really great stories. To all the different artists. Yeah, it was kind of one of those as told by those who were there kind of thing. I like I'm very much like a historian type person. I love it. And so, yeah, that was the kind of thing. When I did Johnny Bravo, I wanted to put in as many Hanna-Barbera characters in the show as possible. So if you go through the show, you will see that I was able to put everybody from Scooby Doo on the gang to Yogi Bear and Frankenstein Jr. and Snuffles. I put Huckleberry Hound in, and what else did I put in there? I put the Flintstones. That was fun. to do a Flintstones episode. So anyways.
Well, like I said, man, I've told you plenty of times, thank you for sharing those stories. Because most of the time people are super guarded with some of these stories. So I appreciate when you guys can open up and really share something. We talked about the live action, man. So I think it's zany. My handwriting is horrible, so I apologize. Johnny's 90s crush was Farrah Fawcett. Before I ask you the second part, is that true? I have to imagine it was.
Johnny's 90s crush?
Yeah. He seemed
70s
so
crush.
no, he just seemed like he was so sure of his answer. He's like, Johnny's 90s crush was Farrah Fawcett. Who would it be in current times?
Okay.
Or who was his 90s crush?
Heather Locklear.
That's a good one to have.
Because I tried to put her, whatchamacallit, I remember I wanted her to be in the show and she didn't. She said no. She was in the height of Melrose Place at that time.
Yeah. So who would it be in today's day and age? Who do you think he would be crushing on?
Gosh, why is it everybody's I would say Charlize Theron.
That's a great one to have too.
Why am I saying her? Because her name rolls off the tongue really easily, or the name sounds. There's a joke in there somewhere that I would have to take a while. It's fun. We did a Johnny Bravo video game. I don't think it turned out very well, but I got to write it, and so I got to write down every single. It's like, give me 10 ways Johnny would say no, 10 ways Johnny would say yes, 10 ways Johnny would say yes in a happy way, 10 ways Johnny would say yes in a sad way. I had to write all these different, so it was fun to riff on that and just do a lot of improv of what Johnny would say and what other people would say to Johnny. And yeah, I love being in that mode. I'm not in that mode right now.
No,
but
it's
when you asked me that question, I started going to that mode and I was like, oh. And then, but sometimes when I get in that mode, I can get sexist, and so I had to stop myself.
Yeah, I don't need you getting canceled, James. I don't need it to happen. Consumer of Tunes wants to know, would Johnny Bravo get along with Beavis and Butthead since they both think they're chick magnets but fail to get the girlfriend?
No.
No?
Why would they not? Because they're kids. He's not into kids. So, and they would actually make fun of him, and he would be like, why am I giving you the time of day kind of thing? Yeah. It's pretty much, yeah, he wouldn't hang out with them because they would think he was a big nerd and he would feel bad. And so he would just be out of that situation. Yeah, that's.
We're not having a crossover with Beavis and Butthead and Mike Judge, boys and girls. 47 Cartoon Guy wants to know, what would Johnny Bravo do an Adult Swim revival? I got to imagine, I mean, it's the 90s was pretty risque. I mean, the 90s is kind of what Adult Swim is now. But you know, would you change anything if it was on Adult Swim, or keep it the same? Keep it the same. Yeah.
There isn't much that. There was actually a Playboy joke in one of the episodes that I'm like, oh, I don't think we should have done that one, but oh well, it's there.
It's a part of history. Andrew wants to know, have you seen the Twisted Tunes panel with Jeff Bennett reading Gaston quotes from Beauty and the Beast as Johnny Bravo?
Nope.
No? We'll see if we can't rectify that a little bit later.
It exists.
It exists. It's out there. It's in the ethernet. My buddy Larry, best friend here, does all my editing and everything like that. So thank you, Larry. You do an amazing job. Where's my Johnny Bravo and Samurai Jack crossover?
They've done them. They have the interstitials on them. Where Johnny and Samurai Jack are at the laundromat. That's the closest thing that you'll get to that. Have you seen that one?
Yeah, I think so. I want to say yes. I've seen a lot of shit, and half the time I'm intoxicated because the weed is strong these days, man. So I don't know if it was a product that was put on or if it was something that
It's real.
Yeah.
It's real.
Okay.
It's cute. I think it's fun.
My buddy Brian wants to know, does Johnny Bravo ever find his smoking hot mama?
He did in the Valentine's Day special.
Beautiful.
You have to
Bradley
watch and see how it turns out, but that would be it.
Beautiful. That's the one, Brian. Bradley wants to know, who's Johnny Bravo's dad?
That's a whole other story. It's a big, long thing that someday we'll figure that out.
Beautiful. We'll revisit that one in the part 2 someday. Eric wants to know, what's your favorite episode?
I really like the cartoon makeover episode.
Which one was that one?
It was with Weird Al and Don Knotts and Blue Falcon.
That's a fucking guest lineup right there in itself.
It was yeah, they played the cartoon makeover team, and they came over to make over the Johnny Bravo. I thought it was funny anyways. He even had a Full House joke inside there. But yeah, that was written by Adam Pava, who wrote, Adam wrote Box Trolls, that movie.
Yeah.
And he created Inside Jimmy's Head. So
I don't know that one, but I know the Box Trolls. I took my kid to see that one. He really dug that one.
Yeah.
Nick wants to know, what was it like when Johnny Bravo was nominated against Dexter's Lab at the Annies? Some of these things are pretty deep cuts, so I don't know too much about them, but
it was never up against Dexter.
Okay.
So
there you
the
go,
deep
Nick.
cut is not correct. Johnny was only up for the Annie Award for Best Animated Short, the original one.
Okay.
And it was also up for like a sound one. Oh, it was up for Best Writing on, which episode was that? It was the Mother's Day episode that Steve Marmel did. That was nominated.
Yeah.
But it was, I guess that's probably but that was just for Best Writing. So yeah, I've only been to the Annies a couple of times. I presented one year, which was fun.
Yeah.
I think I presented to Bruce Timm that year.
Oh man, that
was a fun one.
Yeah.
Anyways, no, that's what it feels like. It's like the one year that we were up for a Cable Ace Award, which no one really cares about. It was the very last year of the Cable Ace Awards, when cable was still a big thing. We were up against South Park, so it was South Park's first year. They won. It was us, South Park, and Freakazoid.
Oh, I remember Freakazoid.
But that was an interesting night. I remember Michael McKean called it the Kabalache Awards.
Kabalache.
But yeah, those were some of the few awards that I remember it being up against anyone. Against Dexter, it's never really up against Dexter.
Yeah, like I said, some of these fans questions, I don't know if they're bullshitting or if they're maybe they just didn't know. And that one was just weird because, like I said, I Google it and then you can never really find anything definitive with something like this, because it'll go, oh, Dexter at the Annies, or oh, Johnny Bravo here, and it's like, oh, bitch, I just want you to answer this question, and I'm glad you answered that question, man. We get a couple more here. Sibo wants to know, with streaming platforms picking up ideas for all sorts of new cartoons, what projects have been piquing your interest out there? Is there any shows that are on the streaming networks that are getting picked up that you are particular to?
Is there? Kid Cosmic.
Oh, that's a good one. I really enjoy that one.
I like Craig's stuff is just crazy good. Let's start there.
Ultraviolet Gray wants to know. Nope, we answered in depth about the Scooby Doo, so I apologize. Roy, and this is the last one. Roy Van Deer Lee wants to know, why are women not attracted to Johnny Bravo even though he's so handsome? Before you answer that, the guy, as soon as the other guy that answered the question underneath his question was, it's because he's a douchebag. So why is the internet never fucking takes a day off sometimes. Some people just want to ask a question and other people just want to hate on it. So why do you don't have to think about it because you created the character, but why aren't the women into Johnny Bravo, even though he's so damn handsome?
It's not necessarily about being handsome. It's about how he approaches them. Mm-hmm. Right?
Yeah.
It's like if anyone approaches you in a aggressive way, you're immediately turned off by that, unless you can see past all that.
Yeah.
So it takes a certain person to be excited about that, because they either think it's funny or they think it's charming or they like you for your looks. So there's that. Yeah. So it's always an immediate response. So, and I think that the more you get to know him, the more you realize, then you start to like him.
He's a lovable guy, man.
So it's like whenever anyone says, is he ever going to get a girl? It's like, if he takes the time to in a girl, yes, but it's never, I think he's more ADHD than that. It's like, I need to get this girl's number, and then he gets the girl's number, and then he forgets the number. It's kind of like that. If he ever got a girl's number, he would lose it. And he wouldn't know what to do. So it's not for lack of trying, it's for more of the sport. It's kind of like, that's his sport. I'm going to go hit on women, and then I'm going to see if any of them will rub my feet. It's like, but it's that simple, I guess you can say.
Beautiful, man. So, like I told you when we first started, I really appreciate you I apologize for taking so much of your time tonight. I did not know it was that much time until I just looked up. I figured it was only a couple hours. It's a couple hours and a half, but nonetheless, man, is there anything
I don't think I said anything much, really.
Shit, you had some of the best stories I have heard on here in a long time. That's nothing disparaging against any of the guests I've had on here. This is one of my favorite talks. So I'm not just saying that because you're on here. One thing that most people will get to know once they get to know me is I'm pretty much straight shooter. I tell you what's on my mind. I cut the fat type of thing. I don't sit here and try to placate anybody. I don't try to build anybody up that doesn't need to be built up just to flex on somebody's ego or massage somebody's ego, excuse me. But this is one of my favorite conversations I've had in a long time. It's been fun. No, thank you, man. Like I said at the beginning of this is one of those shows that we always look forward to as kids. There's so many kids that are my age now, or used to be kids. Now we're adults. It sucks being an adult. Stay a kid for as long as you possibly can, ladies and gentlemen. But you made so many of our childhoods so fun by making this show. I know it came with its trials and tribulations. You made it through, and I'm glad you did. I'm glad you got to come back on this show and finish it your way. You got to take your character and actually show people how it was done. Very few people get to do that, let alone get to come back and finish the story their way. So I'm glad that happened, and I really appreciate everything you've done. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you'd like to tell people about that we can push traffic towards your way? I know we talked about a couple shows you just got done. You said writing for directing, or both?
I'm directing on the Wolf Boy and Everything Factory and Pete the Cat. There's still new episodes coming out with those two. So those are fun. But no, I love talking about this stuff. You've only scratched the surface of the funny stories, because it's even more crazy, I guess. I have like fun. I have photo albums from just all the years because I love taking pictures. So that's why I have a lot of random memories about this, and I still see people, and so we still share fun stories. because it's kind of like, I feel sometimes like I was the Forrest Gump of animation in the 90s.
That
Because
is a phenomenal reference point right there, because there's going to be people like, what is he, special needs? Like, no, he went through the entire the entire history of Cartoon Network, where it started. He talked about who was there, when was there, and that's what Forrest Gump did, man. He's showing up at Black Panther parties. He's showing up in the Vietnam War. He's playing ping pong to win for the U.S. Olympic team. I mean, he fucking brought Dr. Pepper, and he talked to JFK. He talked to all these, spoiler alert, ladies and gentlemen. So it's fantastic. That's such a great reference, man. And you're fucking the Forrest Gump of Cartoon Network, bro.
But it is funny because I did this book, which I don't think it's gonna get published. They actually flew me out to Cartoon Network and let me stay there overnight, going through a file cabinet and learning about all their archives. And I talked with everybody off the record about the creation of the network or what it was like there. So I got some amazing stories, and I've just got to know everybody. And some people were like way more willing to share all the stuff. They're like, but you can't print that. I was like, okay, it's fine, but it's fun to know. Yeah. So I have this affinity to Cartoon Network because it's like I've been there since the beginning, and I kind of watched it grow. No, I didn't, and I got to be a part of it, which is amazing. And being able to because I can go back there and I can tell you some fun, really fun stories, funny stories, dirty stories, amazing stories, weird things that happened, weird things that are just gossipy. I'm like, I don't want to gossip about that. There's just a lot of things. It was like my college experience. It was like 4 years at Hanna-Barbera. And then I got to go to Cartoon Network for another number of years. And being able to watch people grow, watch people do their thing. It was fun. And so, yeah, I do have this random memory base of the network. And yeah, because I loved seeing everybody and watching what went on. And I was like a sponge when it comes to all this stuff. Because like you, I was a huge fan. So my favorite thing was on the weekends, they were digitizing everything. And there would be boxes of animation that they had to digitize. And I went through tons of animation. They had tons of stock animation. And I would just go through the photocopying machine and go zing, 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 zing.
Yeah.
And so I have a bunch of model sheets, animation stuff that just makes me smile, stuff from my childhood, drawings from different people that I just loved. It was cute. Joe Barbera, for my wife's, one of her wedding parties or whatever it was, we did a Hollywood theme. So Joe Barbera drew this picture of Tom and Jerry with presents raining down, and it's just cool. It's like your friends just made history, and it's neat, right?
It really is.
Yeah, you watched all these people make history, and you're like, that was awesome. And it's like people mention folks all the time that I'm like, I could tell you a story about that, but it's like I don't want to jump in and just share random. And sometimes it feels like I'm the old grandpa. It's like, hey, I have a little story. I'll tell you about this time that I have a ton of those random stories, and it makes me laugh. And so I just smile in my head. And then when I see the people that I can share those stories with, it's so much fun because we remember them in different ways. And it's like, oh, I forgot about that part. So yeah, I had a unique vantage point of the history of the network. So anyways, it was fun sharing it with you.
It really was. Give me 30 seconds right after we get off this call. I want to tell you one thing, and then something that I told you, super secret squirrel stuff. But I don't think any better way to